Welcome to the first episode in a Legendarium series about the creation of Normandy. In part 1, the Siege of Paris, we will talk about how the 885 Viking assault upon early medieval Paris accelerated the collapse of the West Frankish kingdom. On June 20th, 840 AD, Emperor Louis the Pious, son of Charlemagne, died on Petersau, an island in the Rhine River near Ingelheim. His heirs buried him in the Abbey of St. Arnaud in Metz. Following the death of Louis the Pious, civil war broke out among his heirs, who would have inherited the Empire of Charlemagne, which stretched across modern-day France, Germany, and northern Italy. The wars of Louis's sons ended in 843 AD with the signing of the Treaty of Verdun. This treaty effectively created two kingdoms, West Frankia, which would eventually become France, and East Frankia, which would become the Holy Roman Empire. Civil wars erupted occasionally throughout the late 800s, especially whenever a reigning king died and his successors fought over the inheritance. All sides hired Norse mercenaries to fight their enemies. By doing so, they made the Norse chiefs wealthy, helped them attract more warriors, and made them familiar with imperial geography. Even when the heirs ended their wars, the Norse saw no reason to end the fighting. The Danes first attacked Paris on Easter Sunday in 845. A chieftain said to be the quasi-legendary Ragnar Lodbrok led a fleet of 120 ships and 4,000 men up the Seine River. After defeating troops led by West Frankish King Charles the Bald, Ragnar's men plundered and occupied the city of Paris. King Charles now had a far greater problem than a lack of hair. The follically challenged monarch gave the Vikings 7,000 pounds of silver to leave. More preoccupied with defending his throne from power-hungry brothers and rebellious counts, Charles the Bald repeatedly paid the Vikings tribute raised by taxes on his vassals. He hoped the money would make his Norse problem go away, but the payouts only encouraged more raids. Ambitious Norse chiefs learned that they needed only to occupy a town and wait until the local lord gave them silver to leave. During the occupation of Aachen, Charlemagne's capital, the Vikings stabled their horses in the cathedral. Even worse, Charles the Bald barred his overtaxed subjects from building fortifications. He feared that rebellious counts would use them for protection against royal armies. Instead, Charles only forced lesser men, like aspiring warriors, parish priests, and peasants, to accept the rule of counts and dukes. In such times when Viking raids could occur at any time, only a local strongman would be of any use. The collapse of Charlemagne's state had already begun, and feudal society took on a shape it would retain for centuries. Matters came to a head with the Viking siege of Paris in 885 AD. In that time, Paris remained a market town, clinging to a small island in the Seine River. Little more than a collection of timber buildings around the market, flames consumed it on a regular basis. Yet it retained a mystique among the West Franks, as the ancient Merovingian dynasty used it as an acropolis, and people believed that magic blood from kings could work miracles like curing the sick or ensuring a bountiful harvest. Charles the Bald did his best to fortify sacred Paris with two wooden bridges that linked Paris Island to both banks of the Seine River. It also prevented the passage of ships further upriver. Bishop Gauselin of Paris personally supervised the building of a wall that encircled the island. Any Vikings who wished to plunder Burgundy now faced a serious stumbling block, as the two bridges effectively blocked the river. The Viking leader Siegfried arrived in Paris to ask Gozlin for free passage to ravage Burgundy. In exchange, he promised to spare Paris, but the bishop refused. When the next dawn made the sky a sea of blood, the Vikings launched an assault on Paris. Their attack included catapults and battering rams, learned during the many sieges across the Carolingian Empire. Bishop Gozlin held a crucifix as he looked out from his perch atop the city walls, and after surveying the Vikings gathering far below on the banks of the river, he planted his cross on the ramparts and picked up a bow and axe to personally lead the defense. Parisians launched arrows from crossbows and poured buckets of boiling oil, pitch, and wax onto the howling raiders. Viking berserkers, who may have induced a narcotic high by eating toxic mushrooms, could supposedly work bloody wonders. They caught arrows in their hands, fought with a spear in each hand, and bit the rims of enemy shields in their terrifying rages, at least according to the chroniclers of the time. When Siegfried's men failed to take Paris, he hunkered down for the winter on the banks of the Seine River. The Vikings did not attack again until the last day of January 886, when they launched fire ships into the Grand Pont Bridge. Their attempt to burn it failed, but what the Vikings couldn't do, nature did weeks later, when floods washed away the other bridge, Petit Pont. The Vikings could now move further upstream and continue the siege as hunger claimed many Parisians, including Gozlin. Desperate Parisians within the walls began to eat their family pets, putting dogs and cats into their bowls. Soon after, the truly famished began to slaughter horses and even rats. In October 886, King Charles the Fat, the new ruler of West Frankia, sent troops to end the nearly year-long siege of Paris. The king ultimately paid the Vikings 700 pounds of silver and granted their request to move freely up the Seine River so they could ravage Burgundy. Parisians felt betrayed by their ruler, who failed to defeat the pagans after they suffered so much. The Burgundians had even better reason to revile the king's cowardice, as Norse warlords freely raided the Frankish wine country. Though the Vikings never took Paris, the nearly year-long siege marked a turning point in West Frankish history. The failure of the king to protect his subjects accelerated the decline of royal authority and the rise of feudal lords. After the nobles removed Charles the Fat in November 887, the lords of West Frankia eventually chose Odo, the Count of Paris, who led its valiant defense as their new king. And the Vikings had gained a taste for Frankish treasure. They would be back. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.